Well, good morning, everyone. It's absolutely fantastic for me to be here today with all of you. I stood on the stage actually 25 years ago here in Gimli in 2000 for my first annual convention, and I was saying something about letters and diaries and current convention. The thing is that I made a lot of friends that day that I still keep in touch with. So coming to the INLNA was an amazing experience. And today I get the opportunity to talk about what has been my passion for the last couple of years or so, which is the Icelandic language spoken in North America. Now, I do talk about it a lot. I go to conferences and I talk to linguists and I talk to Canadian studies people and Icelandic general public, and I talk about it from different perspectives, mostly about the language itself. But in those cases, I would give like one whole lecture just about past tense, which would not have fitted very much here. So I decided to go a different route and talk about the status of the language as it is today and what's going to happen next. Because I think that's something maybe some of you might be thinking about. So before we're going to talk about that, we're going to jump a little bit back into the past, way back to 1970 or so, to those people there. You can imagine what it was to move away from everyone you knew, from everything you knew, and go into a complete unknown. Go to a country that you don't know, actually a continent that you don't know the land, you don't know the culture, don't know the people, don't know the language. So you can imagine that when the Canadian government actually offered the Icelanders not only a substantial loan, but they could buy things more that they would need, but that they would actually be able to settle in an area only Icelanders would be allowed to settle, which meant that they would not be going to ask much of the money. Definitely new land. Living with people that maybe they did know, at least people that had the same culture, had the same background, and spoke the same language. So the language has always been a very important part for people. And yeah, we know that like from the beginning, people didn't agree on what should be the future of the Icelanders. I know Ryan about the settlement and all those things and probably reason for leaving, so I'm kind of leaving all that out. But we know that early on they started arguing about should New Iceland stay closed, should we be opened up. Some people actually believe that it would be better to just open it up and fully immerse into the North American culture because the Icelanders were inferior anyway. And that's why they left, they said. So people did not agree on this. And it's very interesting that basically as early as like 1877, 78, when Trump was the newspaper, they were arguing about this, arguing about the role of Icelandic language should be in North America. And I've actually given a whole talk just in that debate because it's really interesting. So you should read from here. The ability to the Icelandic language. I think there's an English version of some of that. So it's really cool. But I wanted to stop here because one of the guys who participated in this debate was Halldór, and he was really, really an interesting guy who saw the future. And I want to just give you a bit of a quote from him because he really explained what would happen and what should happen in his opinion. He said, but he said, it is true, of course, that the Icelandic language and the Icelandic ethnicity will hardly remain here for centuries. It will sooner or later turn to America. All such changes must happen at its own time and gradually follow a natural course when time and circumstances make it inevitable. And then he continues a bit later, we assume that to manage to develop any kind of significant intellectual life, our literature will gradually move into the English language. And the history of it and the Icelandic literature has become an acceptable in English as Icelandic, and when we can learn the subject of our literature and the story of the land of the fathers through English, Then we have reached the time when the Icelandic language and ethnicity disappear from natural channel into the American world. So you can all know what happened. So you can imagine that this is extremely accurate description from Hunter, and that now that you do have access to the literature, to the history, to all kinds of Icelandic and English. So definitely reach the time. And think about it. People claim that we're living in a country where another language is dominant. Technically two, but most of us, your forefathers were in the English world. Many Icelanders visited, particularly here in the New Iceland area and some other Icelandic places, but so many more actually that lived in places where there wouldn't be anyone to talk Icelandic to. There would also be the children. They didn't always see the point. They were living in a country where the future was English, so the kids often didn't want to speak the language. There is also, of course, starting to marry people of other descent. You have Icelandic boy and Ukrainian girl and English together, and what the kids gonna do? So there's the reason. And then just to kind of mention one of the big ones, is of course, we just know that they played a huge role in the Icelandic language being used less, because when you are in war, it quite often leads to increased nationalism. It increases its hostility towards minority groups. And this actually led many Icelandic people to stop speaking Icelandic to their children. And I've met families where the oldest ones speak the language and the youngest ones don't, because the youngest ones were born after the war. And this was means that generation grow up without Icelandic. So, sorry. I'm going to give you just a few facts. 150 years after the establishment of New Iceland, there are still people of Icelandic descent in North America that speak Icelandic as their mother language, that can keep a conversation going in Iceland. It's amazing. I've interviewed many of them, and it's absolutely fantastic. And there isn't everyone who has and not all nations that have the language going as long as this. I've talked to people that are of seventh generation, but mostly this is third, fourth generation speakers, and that's amazing that they are still speaking the language. But back to, we know that they are getting few, and they're getting rather elderly. There's not that many of people that speak the language, and most of those that do speak it, they learned it in Iceland, and not from the This, of course, means that North American Icelandic will disappear. Not that long to wait for that to happen, but nevertheless, this is not a disaster. Parts of the will survive. And this is kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. It's like part of the Icelandic language in North America will survive even when the last speakers that speak it as a mother language are gone. And now you might notice that I'm talking about the language disappearing. I'm talking, of course, the dialects here. Of course, it's constant accents moving here, and they have kids, and they can speak Icelandic, but that's not true of American Icelandic in the same way as we talk about here. But we're talking about the language spoken by the descendants of those first immigrants that came basically between 1870 and 1914, most of them. So this is the kind of the language that I've been studying. It's that particular language. So I wanted to just to give you a small pause for each of you to think, what of the Icelandic language survive in North America? Let's take a look. Let's start with where we are. Gimli, of course, the whole joy where everyone's going to go after it. There's about Húsavík. We have Lunda. We have and all kinds of other places that have their names here in North America. And I mean, this is just a few. There's much more. These names will survive. They have survived until now. There's very, very few Icelandic place names that were changed into English ones. There are some, but there are very few. So these ones will survive, and we also know it because you go to northern Scotland and you see the place names with all that Viking kind of old stuff. They still have the names. There's like this spelling differently sometimes, but they're still there. So why assume these ones? So even though the land is different communications, these ones will survive. This is Icelandic. There's more. Look at that. This is one of my favorite things. The little signs, they're absolutely fantastic. And I just love walking around here and seeing those signs and all the different names. And I think this is such a fantastic project because, as you know, Icelanders gave everything names, farms have names, houses and towns have names. That it was small enough town not to have streets and numbers. And when the Icelanders came here, there was this kind of numbers and lots. But they kept on this tradition, gave their houses names. And those names, of course, are not registered officially, but people are doing this to make sure that it's there. And more now, they're giving their houses names, even though there's not old stuff. They're just creating new ones, which I really like. And can you imagine, this is one of the strongest marker identity that you can give. You're basically putting a sign on the front of your house that I am of Icelandic descent. So it's really, really a strong little thing, and I really love it. I was trying to find, when we're coming off on Highway 8, I was trying to find the first sign that you see that when you come in, that is marking that you are now in New Iceland. And I remember that there was one fairly early on, and it must be gone because the first sign I ended up seeing was proposally broken. There definitely was one before that at some point, but I was a little disappointed because I kind of had this first line in mind of an article where it would say, like, when you're driving Highway 8 and the first book sign, you're in the West. And they changed the yeah, days. Well, the tradition in Iceland, Jóhannsdóttir, Johan. So most of us don't have a family name. Those that do are usually descendants of Icelandic students that went to Denmark and created names themselves. But when people came here, because they had to have family names, and some of them created themselves. Some are just given one, but whoever brought them into the country. So you start seeing those ones. Jonasson, Ottoson, Westron, Eliasson. These are just the last name of the family. Some people take the son part out. So, Agri, Goodman, very common thing. Some created names for themselves. You can probably accurately guess where people come from that are called Walker. These names, they will survive as long as you guys keep making babies. So yeah, this is definitely something that will survive. It is, yes, this is not disappearing. The first generation names the kids usually as the basis. Then you start seeing the English names kind of come in, and then around the time I came in 1999 to North America, and few kids at that point had Icelandic names, so it seems to have started to come back, and it seems to be now some of the younger people are naming their kids Icelandic names. So I don't know what's going to happen in the older 20s. I've heard those Icelandic names and Icelandic Americans, but they might get that coming and going. Names for the last things. They will survive. I mean, you just walk around and you see streets named after people and all kinds of things. The cemeteries always peaceful and beautiful places to walk around, and you can see all of these Icelandic names on there. You have here Freeman and Redford. You can see that the first names of those people was Lloyd, John, and Anna, which might be anything because so many people have that. But this is a typical example of the first names being English and the last names being Icelandic. And then, of course, the decorations there. And I noticed the first time I came to North America, and I went into one of the cemeteries called Gimli, that the people that were in Iceland usually had some kind of inscription in Icelandic on their race. But the ones that were here had it more likely used. So it was a very interesting thing. And I also thought, this is like a linguistic project. Just actually look at those stones to see what people write. with food, of course. Here's the queen of queens. There's a version of it that still exists in Iceland. I don't know it has different names, but it's just nowhere near the one made here. And I can kind of call it sing wagon. The other one's good as well. And we have Ambition and and Kleiner. And that's actually funny because when I had been at the thing yesterday, I was walking home, to the conference place, and I was walking here past the time place. And there's a little sign that look it. And it was so funny that I took up my camera and I started taking pictures. So the woman, I think it was, but the woman who was there, she just kind of came and talked to us. And like a little kind of Asian woman, and she said, "Oh, yeah, we have I need to look at too." Very smart. You know, time placing. So, of course, people laugh and stuff. That's one of the things that I've noticed, that the spelling isn't always exactly like I would do it, but who cares? The name is there. That's the main thing. So keep doing that stuff. Keep the name. I want the name to follow who. Another thing. I remember being here, and I was talking to people from around who didn't speak Icelandic, but they use Icelandic words. Words and stuff in there. Because I decided to do a little bit of a survey. Here, this is the survey. So this is just I'll explain later why I'm not giving you an example of those words that you probably do know even if you don't speak Icelandic. But these are the people that grew up with maybe grandparents speaking Icelandic. They grew up here and there. Maybe their parents speak it. They can speak the language, but they know those words. So back to that. So keeping the connection alive. Well, there are all these Icelandic associations. The Icelandic associations are keeping people alive, students alive, they're teaching the culture. The culture, of course, is developed slightly differently than in Iceland, which is a thing because it has things a little bit different. The same goes for the language. The language that is spoken here is not exactly the same as in Iceland because it has developed in different ways. And many people that I've talked to in North America speak full Icelandic and have gone to Iceland. Many of them comment on the fact that when they were there, because young people, you speak like that. That was natural because the language didn't develop in the same way, and so they were speaking exactly the language of their. And so, just an example of what use of the word "bruka" is used to use. That's a Danish word that was used for a while, and like when I was a kid, it was like, "You don't say bruka, it's Danish." But then I hear it here. Because no one here was saying like don't Danish. So there's different things here and there, and it's very interesting to look at. But just this is a side thing. But the Icelandic language here has developed very similarly as in Icelandic, in the way that it has all the same roots. It has more or less the same vocabulary. It's starting on different ways, but it hasn't really changed. It has started to be a little bit different, but like we had 2-3 more generations speaking it, then probably we would see more changes. But ultimately, they do the customs in the same way, they do the progressive in the same way. It's the same language, just like me and my husband don't speak exactly the same way, because I'm from the north and he's from the south. So yeah, I'm going to talk about North American Icelandic is a dialect of Icelandic that has slightly different words for certain things, that has slightly different pronunciation for certain things, but ultimately exactly the same language. So back to this, the INLNA Convention. This is a great place to keep the language alive for the people that still speak it to come together and be able to speak to someone, because some of them don't really meet anyone anymore who speaks Icelandic. But of course, you know, that is becoming less and less part of this, but for you guys to just meet, to talk about shared experiences, shared backgrounds, what you were talking about growing up and talking to your grandparents, a couple of things, just this kind of connection, hugely important. And then we get, of course, the festivals that also help make things really kind of connect. All this also builds up certain kind of pride and background, which of course helps with keeping things alive. Sort of, I did try to point to introduce the singing, like the Icelandic was singing for Susan is saying with me, I'm trying to do an Icelandic song. That was kind of disaster. The reasons that I am not going to here. But yeah, no, these things that you guys are doing and just being here is a lot. And then, of course, I mean, we're talking about the language disappearing of the language, maybe as a language of your parents, the mother tongue. But it doesn't mean that the language has to disappear fully, because there's still ways to learn it. And I mean, I really just really wanted to learn the language and Icelandic wanted to learn it. And there are all kinds of ways. So for instance, the Icelandic department of the University of Manitoba is hugely important. I taught there for 4 years. We didn't have a lot of students, but there were always some that wanted to come and learn the language of their background.
Yeah.
And it was very fantastic. And I heard that it has less money now than it had when I was there, but hopefully that will be fixed. Because I think it's very important that we still have the department. And I mean, it is the only department in the world outside of radio. So I mean, that's something. All these Icelandic conversational classes that people are taking all over. Some people come to it already speaking it and just want to practice. Some people know nothing and they just want to know a little bit. Can maybe talk to their grandmother or just know a little bit of their background. These are very important. So I hope the clubs keep offering those as long as they possibly can. There are other ways to do this. I mean, I studied on this. You can take groups. It's been very active now in the offering conversational classes and some kind of beginners classes. These are very. There are also things that you can do through the computers and apps and in apps where you can be practicing your Icelandic. So there are also ways for people that want to learn it. So it doesn't mean that even if your mom doesn't speak the language that you can't. Just have to go maybe slightly different ways. Start from is a fantastic way to get young people here into their background, to go to Iceland, get to know people. And if they like it, they go back, get married to an Icelander, and then go back. Still kind of upset about this. Maybe. She married an Icelander, go back. So, of course, this is a certain danger if you send young people of age marrying to Iceland. But at the same time, you have an Icelandic son-in-law or an law, there's a certain reason for you to go back there. Maybe learn a little bit of language to speak to your grandkids. So yeah, these are all kinds of things that you can do, and you can help the other ones. So young person who wants to learn Icelandic, all this will support them, will help them, give them kind of ways to do so, and that's why this is really important. So I'm going to talk about the two little studies that I'm going to do part about here. One is this survey. So this is for all of those of you who do not speak Icelandic. So I've been interviewing the ones that speak Icelandic a lot. Now this is for the ones that don't speak the language. I'm going to put 2 boxes out there where the registration was, same table. And there's going to be a survey there. And I want you to help me out. Nobody can. So if you take a survey and fill out a little bit. I did it several years ago online, and I'm sure some of you here actually participated in it. And it was great to get some idea of the words that people knew, but at the same time, the word that was mentioned most often was only mentioned by 16 people, but 100 people that participated. And I know that even though only 16 mentioned the word, pretty sure everyone knew it. They just didn't remember. So I decided to go slightly different way. So I put this over here. And it has on the front page a list of words that I don't know might be something that you might know. So if you look through and mark, one is like know it and use it. But if you actually use the word, mark there. Know it but don't use it. Have heard but don't know what it means or something. Or like I know anything like this, never heard it. So you can mark that. And then with the back page, you can add. Because you probably know words that I just didn't even think about, so you can add them on to phrases. I've already put some stuff around here. And then just answer like who in your background was Icelandic and a little bit like that. And forgot to put on it, but if you could write, if you've taken Icelandic classes or not, just add it to it. That would be great, because then I'll know, especially the ones that never have ever taken any Icelandic classes and still know those words. That's very interesting for me. So I'm going to have it up there. So, but just later on, when you go to coffee or something, it's going to be there for information. Pick one up, fill it out whenever you feel like it, and return it to the box next to it. So that would be fantastic. The other part is for those of you who are learning Icelandic who have at some point learned it. I want to interview at least some of you. So if you have been learning the language or doing something to kind of bring it back to your mind or learn the basics, find me somewhere around, contact me, and we could set up a bit of an interview. That would be really fantastic because it's not enough to know about the language itself. We also want to know how it's used, and particularly this part, how are you guys using it, even if you don't speak Icelandic. So this would fill lots of kind of empty spaces in my studies. So, I'm going to finish this up. Firstly, North American Icelandic is disappearing as a language of communication. We know that. There's nothing we're going to do about it, and it's a national thing anyway. It was always going to happen eventually. Place names, family names, definitely we don't survive. So there will still be remnants of Icelandic language in North America for a really long time. The thing is with Icelandic connections that they will stay alive as long as people want. Now I was going to kind of cover questions and stuff, which I know that many places, so I'm going to skip that, but you can always grab me and repeat here at the time. And here you can see what Icelandic linguists do to for North American Icelandic. Yeah, I mean, that's what they're doing a lot for us, and then we just kind of arrested. But it was appropriate to end with this one.